You're tuning into the Dworkin Report, and I'm Scott Dworkin. Today, my guest is someone who needs no introduction, but in case somehow you live maybe off the grid, award-winning writer, journalist, filmmaker, professor, author of the Substack America, America, Mr. Steven Beschloss. How are you doing, Steven? How you doing?
I'm great, Scott. Great to be with you.
Thanks for taking the time. I'm going to start off with a really, really loaded question here, as promised. Um, how did you first learn that you wanted to be a writer?
I honestly, I think as a kid, I already felt like I need to make sense of this world that doesn't make a lot of sense. And over time, I mean, I loved language. I loved sort of constructing sentences and paragraphs and all of that. But I also, more and more as like the world started to seem, I mean, already by high school, I was an editor in chief of my high school newspaper, I, did columns in that were in some ways looking at the absurdism of the world. And so I think I always sort of saw writing as an opportunity to make sense of a world that didn't make a lot of sense to me. And so, to try to figure out what's true and what's false, what's right and what's wrong, what's, normal and what's crazy, and hopefully do it in a way that would be compelling. So, I've been doing this for a really long time, and it's remarkable. I mean, some people say that the writing is hard and painful and all that. Honestly, I love it.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's obviously there's a honed skill, then there's a natural skill, and you've got a bit of both. And you can tell in your writing you've got that emotional spirit, but you also have those that's fact driven
Mm,
skills as well.
mm.
It with the mis or disinformation and everything going on in the world right now. Do you find it hard to kind of overcome any obstacles where there's people out there in the world who don't want people like you to succeed? Have you seen
Yeah.
those barriers for yourself?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, there's the most personal level for me just to corral my own emotions about some things that are just outrageous, and then try to figure out how to actually address it in a way that's, that's helpful, that's reasonable, that isn't just sort of shouting and ranting, right? So that's sort of my side. Then there's the other side, which we both experience, which is, on X and these other platforms of, the abusers, all the people who are interested in attack, and it's always ad hominem attacks. It's never real attacks with, substantive dialogue. It's always just, you're a jerk, you're a this and that. That gets tiring. I mean, I've probably blocked at this point well over 10,000 people on what used to be Twitter. And, I mean, I've had my fill of, death threats and the like, but, it's like you just have to have a tough skin with all that.
Yeah, I agree. And eventually, I stopped reading the comments. Just overall, it's tough. And it stinks because sometimes you get someone like Mark Hamill to comment on your stuff and you don't see it because you're not looking at the comments.
Yeah,
There are some fun things that come with it, but a lot of it is garbage. Speaking of,
yeah. I mean, I will say that when there, used to be a Twitter, I mean, what actually happened was that there was a collection, a community, a collection of progressive voices where people were able to hear and learn from each other, and where there really was genuinely a dialogue. And I connected with an awful lot of really interesting people from lots of different worlds that I just wouldn't have otherwise. And unfortunately, that's one of those things that's gone away.
yeah, and jumping into the something you've been focused on, corporate or mainstream media, however people want to define it, really has been focused on. Let's start with, I guess, criticizing Kamala Harris as
Mm.
every chance they get, but they're so selective. It seems when they attack Trump, if at all.
Yeah,
Are they scared of attacking him? I know that I've seen you post about this. Are they scared of attacking him in case he gets elected? Why is the
yeah.
president willing to go after him like they would anybody else?
Yeah, well, he's such a, constant target, and the constant corruption and criminality and pathological lying. I get that it's so overwhelming that it's hard to, manage and sort of target a response sort of even on a daily basis because there's sort of too many. but I think to this point exactly, I think we are looking at what Timothy Snyder talked about as sort of complying in advance. Timothy Snyder, the Yale University historian who wrote on tyranny and now on freedom. And it's this idea that I think with a lot of the major media organizations that they want their access. They think there's a reasonable chance that Donald Trump is going to be reelected, and they are, whether it's they're afraid of it or they just are preparing themselves for that possibility. I think they're pulling their punches. And that is a profound disservice to democracy and to the country right now at a time when we absolutely need the media not to sane wash, not to normalize, not to treat this election like it's a normal election between two legitimate parties, but where they treat this reality of having one candidate who is interested in destroying democracy and ending America as we've known it. And so far, I think by and large, the media has failed.
I spoke to Ruth Ben-Ghiat about just, dictators and whatnot, and she had mentioned that polling in this country could be very off just because they're not polling a dictator versus a person who would support democracy.
Yeah.
What do you
We,
think?
we don't have two legitimate candidates. I mean, we have one that's in the democracy game and one who's interested in ending it. And it doesn't take a lot of complex thinking or research to figure that out. But there's too many members of the mainstream media that are still treating this like another horse race.
And even after 8 years, I see the press repeating what Trump says. So something along the lines of Trump says hurricanes are magically
Yeah.
found up from lasers or something like that. Even if it's a lie, using it as a headline,
Yeah.
isn't that just repeating the lie,
Yeah.
spreading propaganda?
Amplifying.
Just like I would assume Trump intends to do in the first place. Can't the headline be Trump lies about hurricanes or something? Like, why
Right.
do they keep on using his lies to broadcast? Are they trying to be even about it? I mean, they should
Yeah.
really, it seems like they have a responsibility to call out the actual lies.
Well, look, it took a lot of years. I mean, if we go back to 2016, the number of years it took before, the New York Times and the Washington Post were even capable of using a word like lie. It was always like, a possible falsehood or, kind of claimed, but it was always soft pedaling. And because there was no sort of history of responding that directly to the person in power, this is required a lot of resetting for traditional media in terms of how to cover somebody like this. And I think we're still suffering from the failure to direct the responses as clearly and as precisely to tell the truth about what's happening and use language that matches the reality, that doesn't soft pedal it and then in a way confuse or disorient or undermine people's capacity to know what's true and what's false, what's right and what's wrong.
News orgs went after Biden and a constant about his age and mental capacity.
Yeah,
Aren't they doing the same about Trump now? We did see that one New York Times article, which was pretty
right.
in-depth and whatnot, but like,
But one article, which was strong, but then it seemed to almost disappear from their pages and digitally. And has there been a big response from all the other media adding to that, amplifying it, expanding on it? Nope. So it always seems like the Democrats are an easy target, and because they're operating in a world that the traditional media knows. But then when it comes to Trump and the Republicans, they have a really hard time. And I think, we are suffering still from this very old protocol of the media, which is, to be objective, which used to mean, you quote one side, you quote the other side, and you treat both of them with sort of equal fairness. And in this case, I don't know whether it's simply fear of Donald Trump or fear of losing access to Donald Trump. But it's like everyone has sort of calculated that this guy is in this space. We know he's nuts, and so we just accept it. we accept it rather than demand that he operates according to the principles of the laws of the country.
And I thought that I had spoken with some folks about the fact that if we were to vote Kamala Harris into office, it is one of the ways we can restore truth in the press again, just because there's a higher standard there, and lying. I think people are accountable more so they would be under an administration with hers. I mean, the fact that I'm getting at a second Trump term, though, seems like it would be, they could lie about anything.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that's off limits. Is a second Trump term, and I know that a lot of listeners out there ask me this a lot, like, is it as dangerous as folks like you and I are actually warning folks of? Like, what does it look like if Trump were to win?
Yeah. Well, look, if they've been lying now, you think they're going to tell the truth about anything? They've learned that dishonesty, if they win, dishonesty is the best policy. That's a danger. Let's just start there. Democracy depends upon shared knowledge, shared understanding of factual reality. So they're working aggressively to undermine that. But then specific policies. Let's obviously abortion and reproductive freedom. I mean, we know where that will go if they're back in. But this focus on mass deportations. I mean, that's a complicated, big thing to be able to do that, for millions and millions of people. But Trump is obviously, and his, J.D. Vance and the others are obviously utterly focused on that as this pretend solution to all the country's problems. And they're going to pursue that aggressively. They've already made clear through Project 2025 that's without due process, round people up, put them in camps, without due process, and try to drive them out of the country because, illegal migrants are, destroying the country and poisoning the blood and all of these other lies that they're making. And, really, you could listen to Trump on almost any topic, and it always turns back on this issue of, undocumented illegal migrants as the root of all evil. So I think we have to take that part very seriously. I think the process of the unraveling of that is going to be more complicated than even he thinks. But, look, he's interested in putting all of his loyalists, strip away the nonpartisan civil service, strip away the independent judiciary, do whatever he can to use all of the weapons of government to serve him. And then you add into this obvious commitment to weaponizing and pursuing sort of retribution against his enemies, real and perceived. And, look, it's not just the January 6th committee that would be among those, or, the Bidens or the Harrises and so forth. I mean, I think we can look up and down, the country, from the media to, the political world and beyond that, anybody that Trump and his enablers think has been critical. And I think it's reasonable to assume that we are in danger because of it.
And how important do you think continuity is in regards to maybe our support for our allies like Ukraine?
Mm,
There's clear Trump doesn't support Ukraine. It
right.
doesn't seem at any level he supports.
No, not go back to 2016 and the GOP platform. They took Ukraine out of it because he was already, kowtowing to Putin.
Yeah, and so like how important is it, do you think, for us to have that message and money in regards to backing our allies versus if Trump were to come into office, it doesn't seem like it would be there at all. How
Right.
important would it be to have that continuity of support for Ukraine as Kamala Harris would?
Right. Well, I think that's huge. I think that is something actually Kamala Harris has been leaning into. I hope she does it more. I mean, she did a great job in her convention speech to focus quite a bit on national security. And look, Trump was obviously interested in undermining, if not dismantling, NATO. He didn't succeed the last time. I think he would push more aggressively to dismantle NATO, or at least the USA's involvement in it. And, that's already a great danger. And look, the United States is a country that, Western allies, democratic allies, people around the world do look to as a leader and do look to as a leader of the, democratic values and principles and practices. And so there's a reason why world leaders are deeply worried about Donald Trump getting back into office, because it doesn't just undermine the United States, it undermines the whole global alliance of democratic countries that are trying to do something good in the world.
Why do you think people can kind of look past the fact that he's got four or three into four and four again soon active court cases against him? One where he's been convicted and he'll be sentenced after the election. Like, how can people just look past it
Mm,
and act like it's an even field when you have the
right.
criminal versus the prosecutor kind of situation here? I'm not sure how people can be
Yeah.
undecided, let alone look past the fact that he committed crimes. If he hadn't committed crimes, and there's a release that'll come out soon with a Republican legislator of like, if there were no crimes committed, Republican state legislators, people in Congress, they would have done like crazy hearings about it,
Mm,
investigations. They'd be pushing back against it at the state level, and they've done nothing. And
mm.
so my question is like, how exactly can people act like there's nothing there, but there's crimes that have been committed, he's been convicted of, and people kind of look past it and they're like, well, he might be president. Well,
Yeah, it's alarming that that's again been sort of put into the calculation that people make. Like, well, I think there's some people who are treating it as entertainment, and it's amusing, it's fascinating, it's exciting. I think people are getting tired of it. So I think the chaos and the conflict and the criminality, I think for the majority, and I hope a large majority, I think they're exhausted by it, and that gives me optimism about the election coming up. But I also think that, this, convicted felon, he is a convicted felon, but he's also very gifted at being able to degrade people's understanding of what these things mean. And he's been surrounded by, Mike Johnson and a lot of Republican enablers who have minimized it and who have claimed that these convictions are not real, that they just represent the commitment, of the Justice Department, of the courts to get, this poor politically persecuted man. And, that the repetition has a way of degrading people's knowledge and understanding. And so I think we are suffering from his skill and support for repetitive pathological lying.
and I won't hold you to this, and our listeners won't either. How do you think things pan out in the next month? The election coming up. How do you think things will work out for us?
Well, I mean, I'll say it directly. I think Kamala Harris is going to win the election. I've said, many times what really needs to happen is that she needs to defeat him overwhelmingly. I'm not confident of that. I think it's clear she'll win the popular vote. I don't know what's going to happen at the margins in the battleground states when it comes to the electoral college. I suspect that that will be close, but I'd like to think that November 5th or 6th or 7th we'll have a result, and the world will be a happier place. But I also want to say I think we're going to be looking at weeks or months of whatever the outcome is, of denying what the outcome was, especially if and when Trump loses, to say that it was stolen and it was rigged and he was cheated, and we can scapegoat all these groups that are responsible, and he's been obviously working aggressively to get the commitment at the state level for states that will not certify the outcome if it's not Donald Trump. So, used to be the election happened, you have a winner, we can go on with our lives. I think this is going to be some months, probably right up into January. And, let's hope it doesn't escalate into another January 6th event, but, that's not off the table.
Sure, I've been assured that that place will be a fortress around
Yeah,
then.
I'll
But
bet.
it's a little different this time. I remember the smoke billowing up from my house. You could see it from my apartment that I was in. I lived probably like 3/4 of a mile from the Capitol, off of North Capitol, and so you could see things that were going. I had
Mhm.
driven up to the Capitol day of, and there were so many Trump people there. I was like, I'm not gonna stick around here, and I'm not gonna even try to
Right.
get through this here." And you always have your emergency Trump hat in your car just in case run into some
Did
trouble.
it help?
I've never had to use it, so.
Well, that's good.
Uh,
Let's hope you never have to use it.
Right. And so but I've always got it on me if I'm in, different realm or whatnot. I always end every interview with something inspirational from each guest. So let's say someone's struggling with Trump and all the madness in the world right now, the devastation from the hurricanes,
Mm.
everything that's going on, people using tragedy for political gain. What would you say to our listeners who might be going through something tough right now to lift them up?
Yeah, well, I think the thing I always try to remember is I think that the majority of people are good and decent, who are interested in, who are committed to the role of government and the role of their neighbors and their communities to be making a better world. And I think we have to assume that. And so we're living in a moment where the loudest and angriest voices are wanting us to believe that they are the majority, but they're not. And so, with bringing ourselves together, with voting together, and with sort of sharing ideas and sharing knowledge and keeping tethered to factual reality, I think we can trust that that decency and humanity is capable of triumphing. And let's not forget that, because that's why this fight is important, and why it's possible to achieve a positive end.
You can visit his Substack page at america.news. Steven Beschloss, thank you for joining me today.
A pleasure, Scott. Thanks.